Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Drilling Deeper. We've got episode 40 on tap, and our featured guest today is John Scepaniak from WD Scepaniak, based in Minnesota, and looking forward to introducing him here in a bit. John's been a regular at the Pit and Quarry Roundtable and Conference, and we've had him on the show once before, and looking forward to diving a little bit more deeply today about his company. They're a contract crusher based in Minnesota, but really going a whole lot of other new places these days. And so we'll look forward to a 20-minute long visit with John here in a bit. But as you notice, I don't have Jack Kapansky with me today. Jack is out this week. He's at the National Stone Sand and Gravel Association's Young Leaders Annual Meeting. That's down in Savannah, Georgia. So we miss having Jack here, but he will be back with you on the next episode of Drilling Deeper, and I'll have more details for you on that on the back end of John's interview. But looking forward to, again, sharing this interview that we did with John Scepaniak at Ag1, Aggregates Academy and Expo. Again, we gathered a lot of content down there, did a lot of guest interviews as producers were in St. Louis, navigating the show, looking for new equipment and technology. John was among them. And, as I mentioned, he's a contract crusher in business. It's a family business, and now they're in their third generation at this point. The company goes back about 55 years now, as they were established in 1970, based in Holdingford, Minnesota. But as I already mentioned, they've done projects in over 1,000 projects by now in various states, including Colorado, Wyoming, the Dakotas, and they've kind of centered around the central U.S. as the home ground for their contract crushing business. But in talking to John in St. Louis during that Ag 1 show, it seems like they're starting to look at other territories, expand a little bit, and John's going to get into that a little bit as to why they're exploring that at WD Scepaniak today. WD Scepaniak annually produces more than 7 million tons of aggregate materials. That's a lot of materials, and just to kind of measure up how they fit as a producer, at least in sand and gravel, the U.S. Geological Survey put out their most recent top 100 sand and gravel producers list early this year. I believe it was February of 25, and WD Scepaniak ranked 12th on the top 100 sand and gravel producers list. So, CRH tops that list, and, you go down 11 spots, there's WD Scepaniak. They weren't among the top 100 crushed stone producers, but, because of the work they're doing in sand and gravel, they are among the largest sand and gravel producers in the entire United States. During our interview, John is going to get into a little bit why they're operating in this kind of new mindset, or at least it sounds like a new mindset of being a national contractor, as he's looking at the U.S. now more as an opportunity as a whole. The winter weather up in Minnesota and the parts that they typically would serve, that has something to do with that. They're looking for more year-round work, but the company's customers largely reside in the concrete and asphalt space. That's the materials they're producing, so that's what a lot of their work is going towards. We're going to hear from John a little bit about the workforce. That's a topic that I know he's passionate about. He's gone to events, and he puts a lot of time and energy into this area, really because the future of whether it's WD Scepaniak or any other producer or contracting company, it depends on having a strong, vibrant workforce. And John has some thoughts on this area, and they've implemented some things into action at the company that he's going to share toward the back end of the interview as well. And you'll also hear from John a little bit today in terms of some of the ventures he's doing outside of aggregates. He's a unique guy. Him and his brother have some business ventures aside from the contract crushing, and we're going to hear about that. And without further ado, let's bring John Scepaniak in. Again, our interview took place at Ag 1, Aggregates Academy and Expo, and we'll catch you on the back end of this one. John, I wanted to talk more broadly about your business, about WD Scepaniak. I feel like we've probably known each other 7-8 plus years at this point, almost my entire tenure at Pit and Quarry. And you guys are a contract crushing business. You move around a little bit, based in Minnesota. So for the readers and the listeners out there who don't know you, who aren't familiar with your business, tell us a little bit about what it is you do.
Yeah, so we're a contract aggregate producer, contract crusher, screening, washing. Our bread and butter of our business has evolved to provide our customers, wherever they may be, oftentimes at their sites, with materials production. So sometimes we are the standalone producer for that customer. Sometimes we operate adjacent to their own production line. If there's, they need to increase production for a certain, project or DOT project or something like that. And that's just really what we've built our business on. As a result of that, it's taken us far and wide. Probably 50%, 60% of our annual production and revenues come out of Minnesota and the Dakotas, but then the rest of it is filled elsewhere. Last year we crossed Texas off our list. Right now we're in Oklahoma, Wyoming, Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas. Those are all places we've been in the last handful of years. And, as a contractor, there's ebb and flow with that. Customer needs maybe change, so we won't see a certain state or region for a while, but we're really up for anything, anywhere and everywhere. As we've grown, the world in a lot of ways has shrunk for us. I remember even back when I was in high school, we got a job in Valley City, North Dakota, and that was 4 or 5 hours from the headquarters, and it was like this big deal. And it was a paradigm shift for us because we were a contractor in the aggregate space, but we were somewhat localized, and that really capped what we could achieve from a growth standpoint. There's only so much market share in certain areas, but as we changed our focus and our thoughts and realized that this is the same application implemented across the United States, I really think that there's big opportunity for us to continue on that path. And what we like is partnering with customers that are solid in their regions, and we like to just do a good job for them. I mean, whatever that may be. So,
in your role as director of aggregate operations for WD Scepaniak,
correct.
What's your title, John?
Yep.
Yeah. How much time are you spending? You talked about 50 to 60% of your market share is in Minnesota. So the rest, you're continuously, outside of the state, hunting around, trying to find those deals. I guess, how much time do you put into that? I wonder how much of your growth outside of Minnesota has been word of mouth, doing a good job on this project, proving yourselves, and then getting that second, third, and so forth opportunity with other companies.
Certainly. We don't do a whole lot of door knocking per se. Really it's just been built on that word of mouth kind of relationship way of doing business. Pretty old school in that regard. I'm thankful to say that it's been that way, because really the conversation starts with our results and maybe the great job we did for customer XYZ. They have a partner or an adjacent competitor, and they kind of hear about us through that way, and then we're able to just bolt on and help them with what they do. So it's the word of mouth thing has really served us well, and it's been good.
What do you find competitive wise in the contract crushing space? I mean, is it more competitive today versus when you got into that niche? I mean, I know it's a family business that goes back, you're third generation now, correct? So, I mean, what's that competitive landscape like out there for jobs, for projects, and what's 2025 activity look like as you're trying to get things moving here?
I remember early on, we did a lot of public work, DOT projects. That was probably the majority of what we were doing. I kind of got sick of the heartache of putting a bid package together for a public job and just missing it by, a sliver. We had a consensus that we wanted to push more into the relationship-oriented, not so much low bid, but more negotiated solutions-based business, and that's served us well. So we don't see ourselves as a low-cost provider, but we are, the high-performance provider, and that's served us well.
So what markets, what sorts of jobs are really fueling you guys today? Is it a mix, or is it one part of construction jobs?
So a lot of our customers are in the concrete and asphalt space, so we're producing aggregates for their end use, right? We will do some DOT work. We're partnered with some selective road construction companies that'll have us do materials production for new asphalt material, or some sort of like recycling concrete demo if there's like an interstate job where they're peeling up old concrete, and that's a big chunk of it as well.
John, you had mentioned earlier the whole idea of maybe wanting to venture to new parts. You touched Texas and Oklahoma now, Wyoming, and some other states that aren't necessarily touching Minnesota, but the idea of maybe going to the East Coast or elsewhere. I guess what could hold you back, or why are you potentially thinking that there's opportunity across majority of the country at this point?
So growing up, the thought process was that Easter to Thanksgiving is our season. You run wide open, and then you have the winter off. Most of the employees get laid off. You do some winter maintenance, and you maybe have a lot of free time. as the business has grown and evolved, I don't really like stagnation. I don't like sitting on my hands in the winter and waiting for the next season to come up. So really, just by default, we've chased opportunity elsewhere. In Minnesota and the Dakotas, we're a seasonally restricted region, unless you're in a crushed stone application. But we've crushed granite in the winter, but your conveyor belts and your oils and fluids, it complicates everything. So we looked at, maybe moving south as a way for us to create a revenue stream year-round, to be able to get equipment utilization year-round, really just keep things turning all year long. I think for us it makes sense from a business perspective, because like I said, you can get that equipment utilization on iron and justify the expense of it quicker.
What adjustments, if any, John, going around the calendar at this point? So it sounds like you worked through the winter, this past winter in Texas, in the South. What did you learn, I suppose, by operating not seasonally but by around the calendar?
Sure. So, there's maybe a bit of a changing of the guard internally from an employee standpoint. We have some of those guys that have been with us for a long time, and they're like, I don't want to go to Texas. I want to go ice fishing in the winter. And we just have those conversations, and I ask them individually, what are you looking at getting out of this? What is your desire and work capacity throughout the year, so I can assign you accordingly, right? We're fortunate enough to have teams comprised of some really talented and ambitious individuals that they want to work year-round. They want to travel the country and see new things, and I think they really enjoy the responsibility and opportunity of the positions we've put them in, and it's really a win-win. It gets them out of the cold, bitter winter, and they can see a little bit of the country and keep working. So really we've just, there's some internal shifting, and you got to understand who's on board with that and who's not, and try and accommodate them accordingly. So
you're talking about the workforce here. I mean, we heard about that this morning at the NSSGA annual convention. They had a CEO panel. They talked about the challenge with the workforce. At our event, John, the Pit and Quarry Roundtable, every year it comes up. You can't get away from it. I mean, you're living and breathing it on the front lines of our industry. It sounds like you're having some success there. I know that you've made efforts and strides, going to events like the Bill Witt event, for example, to learn about culture, see what other people are doing. What have you done or adopted or observed, I suppose, in recent years to try to chip away at the workforce issue that our industry has, that maybe is impacting your company?
Yeah, I think I've done a lot to try and understand the human perspective, maybe from the employee standpoint. I have a very siloed view of things because this is the only place that I've ever been employed at. I've been mentored by family, so I have maybe a limited perspective on a lot of things. So I was aware of that, and I was like, I got to try and get an understanding of what people want out of life, right? So with that, I'm very involved in the hiring process to the point of where I am walking lockstep with our recruiter on interviewing people on the phone, in person, really hiring for character, training for skill. You've heard that before. That's really been my thought process on this. I can teach you all the hard skills, but you need to want to do this. So we lay our cards on the table. It's travel work, okay? It's weekends, right? It's nights. It's out in the elements, but it's an adventure and it's extremely rewarding. Are you in? And it's been very receptive. The nice thing I will add is I think at our scale, we're able to offer a lot of the, call them large company benefits. We run modern equipment. We run high-tech stuff. We're very leading edge in the aggregate space. But then also every employee that I bring on board has my phone number. If they have a problem, they can call me. If they need to take, if it's Thursday and they have a family situation that they can't work this weekend, they can call me and I'll accommodate it. I mean, I really think we have a great blend of, big company benefits, but we're low overhead, we're lean and mean, and we're highly productive. And I think with that comes a strong sense of purpose for each employee. They understand the relevancy and contribution that they have within our organization. So I think at the end of the day, when they shut the plant off, they know that what they did mattered. And that's what I think a lot of people are looking for now, is if you can define that sense of purpose, the what and the why behind what they're doing, that can inspire a lot of people to be on your team. And people can read through the illusion, if you're just saying it, but they need to see you walk the walk. And that's one thing I enjoy about my family's company is everybody involved with us, even from my dad. My dad could have retired decades ago, but he loves the industry and he loves doing what he's doing. He loves being at work every day, as do I. I really, the retirement word isn't something that comes into conversation for us because we're just so ingrained in this. And I think our employees see that, our level of involvement, and I think it means a lot to them. I feel strongly about that. And I think that's been a huge contributor to our success. And not to say that we don't have any employment issues or shortcomings, but I think we're in a better position now than we were 10 years ago because we were aware of those problems and we work progressively to solve them.
Yeah, I was going to ask, was there a point, and you just mentioned 10 years ago, but it sounds like there was some transformation that took place because this is an ongoing challenge for our industry. I guess what actively made you guys decide, hey, we want to do something to solve this?
Yeah.
Because again, I know that this is something that you're passionate about, and it sounds like you're making a progressive effort to try to connect with people.
Yeah, I actually think there's a residual benefit of us moving to, I'll call it a national contractor. I just recruit from anywhere. Doesn't matter where your home address is. Like the things I explained, it's travel work. It can be year-round, it can be seasonal, kind of depending on what you're looking for, but you're going to be on the road. So we lay our cards on the table, recruit from anywhere, and we have the core of our business, our core employment force is still from our home radius, I'll call it, localized, and those guys are hitting the road traveling. But to fill some of those gaps, we'll maybe do some recruiting from here, there, and everywhere. And there's a strong network of people that in the United States that do want to do this type of work and travel, and you just gotta dig, you gotta seek them out, and it is a lot. It is a lot of work on the recruiting end. I give not the sales pitch, but essentially outline what this is, to people and probably 100 times a week on the phone. So it's a lot, but it's well worth the effort.
Now, a word from a Drilling Deeper sponsor. Crisp Industries, located in Bridgeport, Texas, is a trusted leader in aggregate material handling systems. With 48 years of experience, they design, fabricate, and install customized systems for the aggregate, sand, gravel, and mining industries. Known for quality, innovation, and integrity, Crisp delivers turnkey solutions that maximize efficiency and meet demanding project requirements. For more information, call 940-683-4070. Again, Crisp Industries is located in Bridgeport, Texas. And now, back to the show.
John, just taking a step back, looking at 2025, what's keeping you up at night these days? It doesn't sound like the workforce maybe as it was 10 years ago, but I'm sure there's something. There's always something that the mind drifts to in the evenings or early in the morning. I guess what's that thing for you, or what are those things that you find your mind wandering off to these days? Or maybe you found peace in everything.
No,
I don't know.
No,
as it relates to work, I suppose, John.
Yeah, no, I really try and be proactive in solving the problems. And lately I've been explaining it like this, okay? Say we're fully staffed. We have every seat on the bus covered. Well, then we're going to want to pursue more work for these people to do, okay? Then you lock down more contracts, more commitments with more customers across a wider footprint. Well, now you need more iron, okay? So now you got to solve that problem. Once you get the iron, well, you don't want to have any machines sitting stagnant. Now you get more people. So it's like this constant chasing your tail, so to speak. And I think you look at any business who's scaled successfully, that's kind of been the cyclical pattern they've been on.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be aware of that and make sure our bases are covered, maybe one or two steps ahead of myself. It's been a lot of fun. When I look back on the last 10 odd years of the growth trajectory we've been on, I feel somewhat accomplished, but I look at that growth and it makes me very hungry for the future and what we can accomplish. I know as we enter new levels of the industry, there's going to be some things that we need to adjust and change as we grow, and different roles that'll need to be adopted or implemented in the organization. But you look at, I'll just pick an example. For our yellow iron and our crushing and screening machinery, for that matter, from a service level 10 years ago, we relied almost solely on the dealer network. With our growth and the footprint we're covering, we needed to bring a lot of that in-house. So at this point in time, we have like over half a dozen, I think right now it's probably 7 or 8 full-time mechanical people, that are supporting a lot of what we're doing in the field just for yellow iron. We have a couple resident mechanics that are, in our home shop every day of the week, and then we have a couple traveling people and that stay ahead of PMs and things like that. And it's good. I feel really excited about where we're at and where we're going, and I'm thankful to be a part of it.
We've talked, this conversation's centered a lot around your contract crushing services. You're a busy guy with that alone, John, but I know you guys do your own kind of custom equipment fabrication.
Yeah.
There's some other unique things you do that are completely unrelated to aggregates. So can you tell our audience a little bit about some of your other ventures,
Sure.
the ventures you're a part of?
Yeah. And a lot of these things pale in comparison in terms of the time occupancy of the main business. I need to keep the main thing. That's always been the focus. But, my brother and my one cousin, we have an agricultural business that we run. We're doing cash crop farming. That just kind of started. It was really Tony's project. And it's something that he spearheads and loves, and it's his true passion, and Brian and I are involved in it as well. It's good. It's a lot of fun. It's just it's refreshing because it's a little bit change of pace when you need to just stop thinking about aggregates. You can go kind of think about farming for a little bit. And there's some other things, commercial real estate. I myself am partnered in an e-commerce company, which a lot of that stuff is just interesting because for me it's interesting because I can draw parallels in terms of like processes and problem solving that I can adapt to the main thing. So I look at it really as a proving ground or a way to make my problem solving abilities exponential, if that makes sense. Kind of speed run stuff by trying to run into more issues and problems to solve, so then I can take those lessons and implement them in the main business. So.
Plus, you mentioned, I don't know if you want to get into the storage locker
Yeah.
thing, but it seems like there's nothing you're willing to get into, John,
Yeah,
at
yep.
the end of the day.
Yep. No, that's incorporated in the commercial real estate situation. We have a self-storage facility, and working with some new developments with some new sites and acquisitions, and that is a very interesting world because it's I don't want to say hands off, but you can set things up to really run themselves remotely, but it's that's been very interesting. I know you and I were talking last night about the storage wars craze.
Right.
Trust me, there's oftentimes if there's one where somebody's not paying the bill, there's nothing in there that you want. So it's been fun, but it was something that I just wanted to try, and then my one cousin Jake, he has a facility on his own as well. So I took a lot of lessons of kind of what he cut his teeth on doing in that market where he has his positioned, and it's just kind of been a fun side project. I know it makes me sound like a crazy person when I say that's what we do to relax, but we're all wired that way. My entire family, where the entrepreneur word gets thrown around. I don't really love that word, but I think we love business. We love problem solving. We love helping our customers and clients, whoever they may be, whatever they need solved. It's ingrained in us. We're problem solvers.
What's the next enterprise for John Scepaniak?
Oh, for me in particularly, I think I better cool it. I like my main craft. I love being a husband and a father, and I think that's all I should really commit time to right now. But speaking larger to the organization, land acquisition, pit and quarry development, getting some new sites rolling and greenfielded, which anybody who's listening and has experienced that, there's plenty of problems to solve there with greenfielding. So that's something we're looking at doing, because really our business was founded on being a contractor. We really neglected acquiring and developing our own resources. So that's something we're leaning into. And then other things, just with the nature of our business, like you had spoke, manufacturing and maintaining our own equipment, just by design, we've brought a lot of our fabrication in-house. We can build a lot of things and fix a lot of things and create a lot of things for our own needs internally. And I think in the next 5-10 years we'll see some progressive developments in that direction, which will be exciting. We'll be able to build a lot of things for ourselves and continue to do so.
Thanks again to John Scepaniak. John, it's always great to catch up with you. Hope you enjoyed listening to this one again. And I'm trying to think back on when I met John. It was probably 7 or 8 years ago, as he's been a loyal reader of Pit and Quarry and our sister publication, Portable Plants, for a number of years. He's been to the Pit and Quarry Roundtable and Conference probably half a dozen times, and actually we recently had John in attendance at the 2025 Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and we appreciated him being a part of that celebration as well. I kind of mentioned it at the top of the program, but John not only has a passion for for the aggregate industry and the work he's doing with WD Scepaniak, but for everything he pursues. I think that extends to the storage locker business or the agriculture that he's doing with other family members. It seems like he puts a lot of thought, time, and energy into the things that he goes about. And I have a lot of respect for John and really value him as a friend and somebody who has been a friend of the magazine as well. So again, John, thanks for getting together. We'll look forward to seeing you at events down the road here, hopefully at the 2026 Roundtable. And if you want to hear more from John, we actually had him as one of our featured guests on episode 38 of Drilling Deeper, so you can hear what John had to say about Ag 1 2025 in St. Louis. I think we cut about 6 minutes from John's interview for that episode. Again, that was episode 38, which you can access at drillingdeeperpodcast.com. And if you want to go way back in the podcast realm with Pitt and Corey, you can go back to episode 9, as John was the featured guest on episode 9 of Drilling Deeper. So if you want to hear what he had to say back in 2023, I encourage you to go, again, to drillingdeeperpodcast.com and seek out episode 9, as that features John Scepaniak. What else is happening at Pitt and Corey? As I sit here toward the very end of April in Pitt and Corey's Cleveland office, we're starting to get the first quarter reports from the public agri producers in. By the time you're listening to this, we're going to have reports on pittandcorey.com from the nation's top 2 producers, that being Vulcan Materials and Martin Marietta. We do already have some insight from Wholesome, which was the first to put out its quarterly reports, or first quarter report industry-wide, and they talked a little bit about weather and how the first quarter weather was a factor that kind of impeded growth. And I'm sure we're going to hear about that a little bit more from some of the other public producers. That was a narrative we heard a little bit in 2024 as well, particularly in the first quarter in parts. And I think, if you're up in John Scepaniak's region, for example, up in the upper Midwest, that was certainly something that kind of bled into the second quarter of 2024. So it's interesting where we are at this point in time, thinking about the last few years with aggregate production volumes. We want to have some dry, warm, aggregate producing, conducive weather months in order to get production where we want, because we're seeing volumes dip from quarter to quarter and year to year. Demand's still strong, but the last thing we want is we're getting into peak production season here across the U.S. is for wet weather, for record level or high levels of rainfall. So, we're already hearing about that in the first quarter, and depending on where you are, hopefully that is not already impeding your second quarter here at the beginning of May. But we also at the magazine, while we're keeping tabs on what's happening with those first quarter reports from the public producers, we should soon be receiving your print edition for the Pitt and Corey May issue. We've got a crushing and hydraulic braking special pull-out supplement in that. We feature a few companies from around the country, including Dutra Group, K&S Gravel, and North Central Aggregates. We've also spotlighted Blue Water Industries in the May edition of Pitt and Corey, as well as now is down at Blue Water in Davenport, Florida in March. They were showcasing, along with McClanahan Corporation, a brand new wash plant that they have online, and it's been online there for a couple of years at this point. So we spotlight what took place there at Blue Water in Davenport, Florida, in the pages of this month's edition of the magazine. Talked to Steve Tilquist, operations manager of Sand Mines, while I was in Florida, and he shared how Blue Water's already replicated that McClanahan plant not only once, but how they're doing that a second time at a Blue Water operation elsewhere. So an interesting case study there in washing and classifying involving Blue Water Industries and McClanahan Corporation. So check that out, again, in the Pitt and Corey May edition of the magazine. And speaking of Florida, I wanted to remind everybody that I know we're still a ways out from the 2026 Pitt and Corey Roundtable and Conference, but that is going to be returning to Florida in January of 2026. Specifically, we're going to be at La Playa Golf and Beach Resort. That's there in Naples, in Southwest Florida. And anybody who's interested in joining us, I'd encourage you to visit pittandcoreyroundtable.com. Same goes for equipment manufacturers and dealers from around the country and into Canada. If you're interested in partnering with Pitt and Corey on our annual roundtable in 2026, you can learn more at pittandcoreyroundtable.com. We've already got some things in the works for the next episodes of Drilling Deeper as well. The next episode beyond today's episode 40 is going to drop on Tuesday, May 17th, and we're actually going to be featuring PPI that day, Precision Pulley and Idler. We had Alan Mathis, the outside sales manager at PPI, visit with Pit and Quarry's Jack Kapansky at Ag One. And Alan's going to discuss when and why wing pulleys are used, as well as why angled wings have become so popular. Additionally, Alan's going to share the history of PPI's herringbone wing pulley, including the broad range of products available within that line, and that includes PPI's plate-constructed HBW. And again, we'll be dropping that episode on Tuesday, May 17th, so you'll be able to access that at drillingdeeperpodcast.com or on your preferred podcast platform. And for those wondering what's even beyond that, we've got episode 42 in the works here at Pit and Quarry. We're going to be getting together, actually this week as I'm sitting down shooting this episode, we've got Armada Materials, Rob Duke, who's going to be visiting with me. You know, Rob's the founder of Armada, and he's going to be appearing on our June 3rd episode discussing the history of Armada Materials, which is a very young company that was established in 2023. You know, prior to Armada, Rob led the South Division of CRH, which was a $3 billion business that had about 6,500 employees, and they covered aggregates, asphalt, ready-mix concrete, bulk material transportation, and more. So, I'm looking forward to catching up with Armada Materials, Rob Duke here in the coming weeks. We'll put that interview out for you on Drilling Deeper, and I'm sure our conversation is going to steer a bit toward M&A as Armada Materials recently completed a deal in Kentucky, and I'm guessing they're looking outward even more with additional M&A activity. So look for our visit with Armada Materials, Rob Duke, in the coming weeks as well. So with that, I'm going to conclude episode 40. We'll have Jack Kapansky with you back on episode 41. And again, want to thank John Scepaniak of WD Scepaniak for getting together with me for our special guest interview today. Well, everybody out there, hope you have a great spring production season. Hope that gets off and running if you're just getting into it in the northern parts of the country. But until next time, we'll see ya.